meeting is being recorded.
Okay, thanks, Arlen. Hi, everybody. My name is Reynolds. I was a public school teacher for 33 years. And you might notice that these are materials that I used in my actual classroom. So my intent is for you to see what I used, what I built, and then for you to tailor it to your own subject, your own grade level, whatever it is that you might be teaching. And I think it's most appropriately used with middle school and high school students. So my intent is, first of all, simplify and organize for your benefit. I was about a third of the way through my career when I realized I was assigning paper, like a paper to students, and for them to write a paper on stress and reducing stress. And when I thought about it, I thought, okay, that just doesn't make sense. They're already stressed, they're overworked, they have too many things going on, and I'm going to give them another assignment on how to reduce stress, but it's just another assignment. It didn't make sense. So I threw out everything I was doing and I rebuilt my class. When you organize things, try to do that for your benefit. I would like as many people to stay in the educational field as possible. And I would like more people that should be teaching to come into the field. I want you to learn how to leave yourself an out. There are days when we shouldn't interact with our students, and you should have an emergency lesson plan in your back pocket. If you've been up all night with a teething child and then you have to go to work, there are activities that you can have your students do where you leave yourself some space so that you can get through the day and come back better rested the following day. Developing rapport with your students is priceless. And there's a number of ways to do that, but it has to be consistent. I liken training high school or middle school students as working with, I would see about 170 students a day, training 170 puppies all at once. And so the more consistent you can be, the better your results will be. Humor is very valuable. Beg, borrow, or steal it. Get a joke book. If you don't feel comfortable, get a joke book and start the class by reading them a joke. You'd be surprised. It's almost like if you were to take a coffee cup and turn it upside down, it's impossible to fill. You're just going to make a mess. But if you turn it right side up, by starting the day with humor or a laugh or a puzzle or something simple, all of a sudden you'll have their attention, and it's much easier to get through your particular subject matter for the day, whatever it might be. Teaching is a marathon, and it is not a sprint to Friday. I know we all relish those days. I understand that, but it is a marathon if you're gonna spend any time in the profession. I did not understand for a very long time that I taught health for the majority of my career, full-time health, 5 classes a day. I did not understand that it is a hot button topic. And I was naive. I thought, who wouldn't want their kid to know what good nutrition is or first aid techniques? But it really is a hot button topic, and you can have parents come after you on lots of different levels. So a lot of what I did was I tried to make sure to color all the way to the edges of the lines and not have myself tripped up. And so what I started to do was develop a syllabus. I had the class completely described. You can see all the chapters there. But I will tell you that the most important part of this syllabus. One, this is their first assignment. If you look up at the top, I have a place for the student's name, first name, last name, and hour. And then I want the signature of their parent or their guardian. They were to bring this in the very next day, and they would get 10 points for it. If I can't read that name at the top, they don't get the points. I have to be able to read it. I don't want to guess. I don't want it to say Carl Scribble. I want to be able to read it. So the two most important parts of the syllabus is, down here I've bolded it, late work results in a grade of 0 credit, and keeping all assignments for the duration of the semester. I actually changed that. This is later on in my career. I actually changed it to late work was a grade of 1 credit. So if they turned something in, if it was a legitimate illness, then that's fine. They get 10 points if they were sick for a day or whatever it is. But if they turn something in late, and I'm sure most of you are very aware that I've had late work be a minute late, a day late, an hour late, a week late, a month late, 5 months late. I'm not going to make a decision on the fly for what it's worth. April 15th comes for all of us sooner or later. So because I built an extra credit list into my curriculum so that they could re-earn their points, it's just really important to be on time. And so for my class, late work resulted in a grade of 1 point. Now, what that meant was if I had 1 point in my grade book for them, that means they turned the assignment in and they turned it in late. So that is their ticket to doing extra credit. This syllabus would go home with students, and I would expect it to come back the next day. If it wasn't back the next day, then it was late. So they could always re-earn any points if they had late work. That was not an issue. And if they were getting a B in class and they didn't like having a B and they had all their assignments in, they could do extra credit and bump their grade up to an A if that's what they wanted. But if they had any missing work, I was not going to accept the extra credit. So this syllabus, you can go ahead and put your own description on it. But the idea is to inform parents or guardians that these are the subjects, they're going to have quizzes, they're going to have assignments, there's extra credit available, but that these are the procedures, that I don't accept late work, because I'm not going to make a decision on what a 10-point assignment is worth if it's late a day or a month or whatever. If it's late, then it's going to be 1 point in my grade book. So the next thing that I have in all of these all of the attachments that I gave you, the syllabus, the grade sheet, the extra credit sheet, there was 2 sides to the extra credit sheet. All of those 4 are handed out to students, and I explained this over the first 2 days, but they're also taped to the wall right inside the door of my classroom so that they walk by it every single time they enter or leave the room. And if they needed additional copies of these, they could certainly have their own copy. They could have their own copy of their syllabus. They could have, they got their own copy of the extra credit. They got their own copy of the grade sheet. So all of these were available for students at all times. So this next one is the grade sheet for my particular class. So you could have a list, and you could just do bits and pieces of this. It is a lot of work, but this has been layered over years. So these are the assignments, and these are the points that they're worth. Now, this particular sheet I would have on the wall, and I would actually fill out the day that it was assigned with a pen and put the due date, and then I would highlight it with, either a yellow or a bright green highlighter or hot pink so that they could see what had already been assigned. And then because it's an infectious process, if you've ever had a kid in your class yell out, Hey, Dr. R, what's my grade? It's contagious. All of a sudden, John or Jan, who couldn't care less what their grade was, all of a sudden they want to know what their grade is. Well, their grade is their responsibility. It's not my responsibility. I just keep score. So I do give them grade printouts. I give them a midterm grade report. I give them a 9 weeks grade report. I give them a second quarter midterm report, and I would give them a final midterm report. If they wanted to know their grades, they have this sheet in their possession, and they should mark down on the far right side the points. Now, this is about fifth grade math. These are straight points. Nothing is weighted. It's not complicated. You add up all the points of whatever we've done, whatever's been highlighted. You divide it by what you've accrued, and poof, there's your percentage. It's not complicated. It's not long and drawn out. It's not weighted. It's not a mystery. I can't tell you how many years I went to school, and I frequently had no clue what my grade was in a class. But I want them to be able to take some responsibility and to know what their grade is at any time. The other part of the syllabus was I want them to hold on to their assignments. In the event, and computers do weird things, in the event that I had a 0 in the grade book for an assignment for a student, if they could pull out of their folder their assignment and said right there that you gave me a 9 on it, then I'd give them the 9. 9 out of 10 or whatever it is, or 36 out of. I kept all of the quiz scores until the end of the semester, so I would have those. But if there was a question on an assignment, if a student couldn't produce that assignment, then they had to do the assignment again, and usually it was because they hadn't completed it to begin with. But this was a handy thing along with the syllabus to have on the wall. And also to pass out to students, because they should be informed. It is their class, it is their grade, and you'll have kids that absolutely will have this grade sheet filled out and they'll keep track of it, and there will be others, of course, that the second day they don't know where their folder is. But I would keep a file. Someplace in my classroom where there was duplicates of the syllabus, there was duplicates of the assignment sheet, in the event that they needed one of those. Now, how could they make up for late work? This is a little lean. I do have another slide with other books on it, but I had extra credit available, and all of these books were in the school library. Please notice the directions on this, because I didn't want a straight book report. I wanted to know, because I wanted to know that they actually read it. I wanted to know their favorite character or their favorite part of the story. Very often, the feedback I'd get from students is nobody ever asks them what they think. Honestly, they very seldom are asked how they feel or how they think about something. And so this one gave them an opportunity to do that. And it also became that the papers they would hand in to me would be slightly different. And there would be funny incidents, and then I would have something to talk to that student about. And those lines of communication would actually help. Oh, is that the part that you like the best? What do you think about this? And there wasn't any limit on the extra credit. If they wanted to do, I had students that were earning 170% in my class. And there were still students who would fail my class. So, some of them just won't do any extra work. And that certainly is their option. Now, again, with this, I want their first and their last name and their hour on everything. If they don't have their full name and hour, I would not give them full credit, because I don't want to have to spend the extra time to figure out what class they're in or where my grade book is and where they fit in. I should be able to read it, and it should be relatively easy. So books were worth 10 points each. The one at the very bottom that you see, I have it labeled separately, medical detectives. It was interesting when I added this. It was when CSI became real popular. and, and the library only had one copy, and kids were fighting over this. So, and it was appropriate to my particular class. So I did give that one 5 points per chapter because it was just a unique book. Now you'll notice that after these book titles, and I also do it with the movie, I try and give them a short description of what it's like, because if it was a young man and he didn't want a love story, I didn't want him to bring the book home and find out later that it was a love story. Some of them are, self-explanatory. Some, if it didn't have an easy description, I just left it blank, and I thought they could probably figure it out. These were some other extra credit titles that I added, and they just didn't fit on the slide. So all the Hunger Games, these are, I want kids to read. I want to give them some value to reading. Sometimes these are subject related. Sometimes it's current events. Sometimes it's just an interesting story. For example, The Spy Next Door towards the bottom. That's a true story about a spy that was caught here in the United States. And lots of my kids that wanted to go into policing really, really liked that book. And again, they're either subject related or they're motivational, inspirational. And I wanted to offer students some way to make up for late work and also have them do appropriate activities outside of school. For kids that are not bookworms and they don't like to read, I didn't want to leave them out. And so there was the other side of the extra credit, and that was movies. And again, I wanted them to describe their favorite character or their favorite part of the story and explain why it was their favorite. First name, last name, and hour. In the event that kids couldn't do these at home, there were a few of the movies available, and they could go in on their lunch hour in the back room of the library and watch them on a TV. I never had anyone take me up on that, but I wanted to make sure that was available for at least a few titles so that it was an option for students. So again, some of these are subject related, some are motivational and inspirational. Hoosiers, Rudy, Seabiscuit. Some are just informational, Supersize Me, things like that. So again, these are worth 5 points each, and I would only grade extra credit right before my grades are due for either the midterm or the 9 weeks or the middle of the second 9 weeks. So kids would hand this in whenever they wanted to, and I would hold on to them. One of the things that I found, which made me really, really happy, was there would be times on a Monday when I would get 5, 7, 9 papers on, like, Remember the Titans. And I'm like, why am I getting all of these extra credit papers on Remember the Titans? And one of my students told me, yeah, my parents had a movie day and I invited all my friends over and we all watched Remember the Titans and had popcorn. And so all these kids got together, some brave set of parents had like 15 kids at their house watching Remember the Titans because it was football season. And then they all wrote their papers and turned them in. So that's very appropriate socialization. I was very excited to hear that type of activity because that's exactly what I wanted. And they all got their extra credit. So moving on. To me, this is the most important element, and I would introduce this in my class when I'm going over all this material for the first 2 days. And the most important element to me is a willing spirit. And I would tell my students that, look, I can give you paper, I can give you pen and pencil, I can give you folders, I've got erasers, I've got whiteout, I've got rubber bands, I've got whatever you need. But the most important element was a willing spirit. And I would just joke, a lot of the way I would develop rapport with students was, you know, um, let them know that you're on their side. And I would say, if you see any of these on sale while you're shopping, Walmart, Farm and Fleet, let me know because I need to pick up some extra ones. And I said, mostly the people that I see that need these are adults, not students. And I had been talking about a willing spirit for a couple of years, and then a young woman in one of my classes actually gave this to me and put a bunch of glitter in a jar and labeled it. And so I kept it in my classroom, and I still have it at home. Um, but that is the most important element. Anything else you can probably um, help them find it or give it to them, pens, pencils, whatever it is. But that really is the bottom line. This is something that I found to be really handy, and with COVID and some kids have really disorganized lives. I had a shelf that was a distance from my desk, and I actually had it labeled student office with a big sign. And I had loose leaf paper, pens, pencils, erasers, whiteout, folders, Kleenex, hand sanitizer. I would say that I would have everything back there except an afternoon snack. Scrap paper, anything else that students might need in your room. Maybe they need a protractor. Maybe they need a compass. To have a couple of those things and to have it away from your desk so that they leave your stuff alone. I always found that. And I put little flags. I had student assistants and I put little flags on my pencils that would say Dr. Reynolds, room 1514, whatever my room number was. And that way fewer of them walked away. Now, if they really needed a pen or a pencil, I'd let them have it. They can take it, folder, whatever. But this helped out a lot of students frequently, numerous times in every day. And it's just another way to meet some of their needs. Now, if you can, close any loophole that you find in your classroom. A big one was I would find there were students who would like to wander. They would wander the halls. Regardless of my hours off, I would see the same 3, 4 students in the hallway all the time. Please excuse me, I'm fighting a cold. But I'm sure that you've seen that same type of thing. In my classroom, I introduce it as, if you needed to go to the bathroom, the answer is probably yes. About the only time I'm going to say no is when we have a quiz out, because I don't want you leaving the room during a quiz. But this would prevent students from wandering. So I would tell them, if you need to go to the bathroom, ask me. I'll probably say yes. What you are agreeing to is you're going to go back to the student office, you're going to get a piece of scrap paper, and you're going to write everything on that piece of scrap paper that a pass requires. Because we always kept really tight locks on pass paper so that kids didn't get their own and then write themselves passes. So I didn't have those available in the student office because that was frowned upon. So I said, if you want to go to the bathroom, you ask me, I'll say yes. What that means is you're going to write out your own pass. You're going to write your first name, your last name, what time it is, where you're going, and then you're going to bring it to me, and I'm going to sign it. And then you're going to go to your locker or the bathroom or whatever it is. What you are agreeing to do is when you come back, I'm going to look at the clock. I'm going to write down what time it was, a minute, 2 minutes, whatever it was. And then you're agreeing to make up that time at the end of the hour. I'm not going to give you a pass to your next class. I remember I had a young man that was in my class, and he was a chronic wanderer. And I would ask my students, I said, have you noticed that there's kids that get out of class? You have 2 or 3 classes with them. And I said, either they have a bladder infection or they have a bladder the size of a peanut, or they just want to get out of class. I said, but this makes it fair for everybody. And if you really need to go to your locker, you can go to your locker. If you really need to go to the bathroom, you can go to the bathroom. But the rest of us, 33 people or whoever we are, however many people there are, we're in here doing what we're supposed to be doing while that other person is going to the bathroom in their locker room. So to keep people from wandering, it works really well. But again, you have to be consistent and you have to make sure that you're recording that time. Now, I will be honest. After class, when everybody would leave, I would have a student who would stay. Um, I generally would have them stay probably a minute and then let them go. Um, and what it did was it just, the young man that I knew that was a really bad wanderer, when I covered this in class, and I said that I didn't go to college to write 6-foot Billy a pass to go tinkle. Um, and when I said you have to make up the time at the end of the class, I just watched him in the back room and he just shrunk because he knew that he wasn't going to be able to wander during my particular class. And it's true, he didn't. If you have projects in your class where they use partners or they do group work, they could do that in my class. I ended up having classes that were so big that when we did different projects, students would do either a PowerPoint or they would build a poster and they would do a disease therapy project, or they would do a psychological wellness project, or they would do a drug project. That it became so overwhelming that I had to allow students to work with a partner, and it decreased the number of projects we had so that we could actually get all the work done. The stipulation is I don't assign those partners. If they want to have a partner, they can, but they're going to manage that relationship. I remember being contacted by a parent saying, my child's doing all the work. My child's doing all of the work for this presentation. And I said, your child picked their partner. I don't manage those relationships. I don't make them have a partner. They choose to have a partner. They need to manage that. And I might suggest that in the future, they do a project on their own and they don't have a partner. And I never heard back from that parent. So, these are lumps and bumps that they do have to deal with, as we've all tried to manage those things. And sometimes they just have to pick a better partner. I did have a cell phone and tardy policy, and use whatever leverage you can to try and take care of these issues. And sometimes, before we had Chromebooks for everybody, sometimes it was actually easier to, on some days, they would actually be able to use their phones so that they could actually do some research, because they could log into our library via the internet and using their phones. So, if they're not supposed to have their phones, that's a whole different ballgame. Then manage that as best you can. I also remember a student, when I'm talking about closing loopholes, I used to allow students or classes to earn parties. And they'd get a party at the end of the first 9 weeks, and then they'd get a party during the final exam time after the final exam was taken. And I had a young woman who was obviously going to be a behavior challenge. And I explained that if we could not collectively behave and be on time, my students had to be in their desks in order to be on time to my class, not in the doorway, because there's like 38 of them. They need to be in their desks. And if we could start and stop and get through all the material, then there was rewards and there were game days and there were fun things that they could do, but we needed to be in our seats and ready to go. And I could tell this young woman was just, she didn't care. She was going to create havoc for weeks, and it wouldn't matter to her if I took the party away from her. She was just going to have fun, trying to disrupt as much as she could. And so I shifted slightly and said, this is a class reward. So I'm not going to take an individual student out of the class to um, and allow the party to continue. If we can't all behave and work cooperatively together, then we aren't going to have a party at all. And again, in her situation, she was in the back of the room. I just saw her shoulders just slope. And in fact, she said, well, why don't you just take that person out of the party? And I'm like, nope, we either reach it together as a group or we don't. So that's just the way it is. So all of a sudden, that peer pressure, she could not handle or risk that peer pressure, and kids putting pressure on her in other classes because of her behavior in my class. So all of a sudden, she became much more manageable. Next one. Now, you know that this happens. I just happened to find this on Board Teachers the other day, and it made me laugh. Bath avalanche. The phenomenon that occurs when one student asks to go to the bathroom and suddenly everyone has to go as well. It also happens with grades, as I mentioned earlier, but there are ways to deal with these. And it's a little bit like a chess match. You just have to beat them to the pass. And it would take about 2 weeks for me to thaw my classes out. And after that, the class sort of ran itself. Students accepted that they needed to be in their desks by the bell. They accepted that they had to have their phones away. They accepted that they couldn't have food in class. But it does take consistency. And sometimes you have to outwit them. I'm just going to be honest. So this was my tardy and cell phone policy. If they had their cell phones out when they weren't supposed to, or they were late, I occasionally would have students who they would come late. They would come late every day. And there was a day where I met a young man as he came in late. Everybody else is seated. They're all ready. I'm trying to take attendance. And I met him by the door. And I said, you need to be here on time. And he's like, I didn't miss anything. And I said, do you see those other 29 people behind me? And he looked over my shoulder as if he saw them for the first time. And I said, all of those other people are in their desks and they're all ready. And I've already taken attendance. And now I have to correct my attendance because you're here and you're late. And I said, you need to be in your seat just like they are before the bell. And it was like he finally got it. And when I would stick with it, with kids that were chronically tardy, they would finally come around and be on time because it was worth it to them. The first few days when I'm asking questions and no one's saying anything, the best money I've ever spent is on candy. I know it's just very basic, and we'd all love it if you didn't have to do so much work to get a group of people all going in the same direction. But if somebody's willing to answer a question for me and actually talk with me and dialogue, I'd throw a piece of candy, and all of a sudden, lots more kids are interested. This is another sheet of paper that I would hand out to students, this particular slide. And I would tell them this is my tardy and my cell phone policy. So with the first offense, whether it was a tardy or a cell phone, I would warn them and I would tell them that the next time it's going to be a progress report. Now, sometimes, with high school students, middle school students, you have to spell it out. You just have to spell it out, and you have to help them understand, because very often they don't get it. The second offense, I had a progress report, just a general progress report for my class, had my name at the top of it, that type of thing. And I would mark on it that they had so many tardies, and that this was part of the risk. They were going to lose a fun activity in class. And that sentence, caution, I do not like paperwork. A progress report is paperwork. You have to tell them that. Half of them think that we sleep in the school overnight. You mean, what do you mean you don't like paperwork? You signed up for this job. But paperwork, like writing a pass to go to the bathroom, it's useless, endless paperwork, and it just takes up a lot of your time and, more importantly, a lot of your energy. And I want you to be able to conserve that. Third offense, detention and loss of activity. Fourth offense, same as number 3. Usually, if I got to step 2, it didn't ever get any further than that. Now, these are assignments. What I found as a benefit here is describing these and leaving these kind of open-ended. There wasn't really anything that they had to do. I wanted them to find something new out about subjects that they didn't know about. They had to do a presentation to my class. What I found is with presentations, they actually had to do some work. There wasn't anything I required other than their source card. So I wanted it to be open-ended because I wanted them to discover things that they didn't know, and I wanted them to discover something new. When I assigned an option as a paper, I will say that a lot of it was plagiarized. And so I don't think a lot of learning was actually going on. For this, they could either do a PowerPoint or they could do a poster. They could have a partner if they wanted to, and they would present. I would actually, when I had the room to do it, I had them form in a circle, and they actually presented from their desks. They didn't have to get up and do my job because I chose my job. They may not want to do public speaking. Public speaking is like, people fear it more than death. And so I wanted them to be as comfortable as possible. They could read from their PowerPoint slide. They could present from the posters. They could write it out and read it if they felt more comfortable, however they felt the most comfortable. I did limit it with certain topics like rabies, chickenpox, or measles. Any third grader can tell you the basics about all 3 of those. So do something different or interesting. Please excuse me. I did want them to try and avoid using Wikipedia because it's a blog. It's not actually a source. Quackwatch.com I wouldn't accept, or skeptic.com. We would have 2 library days to complete this. And these are some of the topics. And now some of them on the right-hand side, I would accept .coms because many of these have not, the information has not fallen through our colleges and universities. And so some of them have to be researched a little bit differently. And so I had these written up. And then students could just choose. Sometimes there would be a popular one and I would have to limit it to 2 presentations. Students who saw me the first day that we were doing research, I would write their names on a list similar to this, and then they would be the 2 groups of students that would be able to do it. And you could do this for, you can do it for art, you could do it for math, you could do it for just about anything. Now, when I graded the projects, if they gave me their rubric sheet, I would give them a +1 because they're able to bring it to their presentation. Then I would take their source card and I would staple it to the top corner, and then I would time their presentation. Each of these was worth 5 points. If it was between 3 to 5 minutes, somewhere in there, they'd get all 5 points. If it was 15 seconds too long or too short, they would lose 1 point. They couldn't lose more than 5 points on any of these 4 items. Accurate information. Is it accurate? I had a student who did a project one time, and he said there's zombies crawling their way out of the earth in Europe, and we have to be careful because if they come over here, we're going to have a hard time. Well, I'm like, what? Well, he had used um, a comedian who had written a history book, which was not accurate information. That was his source he used. So he got a 0 on that because none of it was accurate information. And actually, I allowed him to do his presentation again. I said, maybe you should do something else. So he had to do his project all over again. The visual aid is the PowerPoint presentation or the poster. And that's gauged according to how much information. Was it colorful? Was it interesting? Did they do a video? How did it look? And then the source card. They have to have 3 sources, and they have to have their first name and last name and hour on that. And that was 5 sources. So again, because you're grading presentations, the grades are all right there, and the grading is done. All you have to do is add it up, and there's your project grade for the student. Now, this was a source card, and I expected them to have their first name, last name, and hour, and I need to be able to read all of it. And they have to have their 3 sources. Now, I would require it on a 3x5 card, and I would deliver a packet of 3x5 cards to the library. At the beginning of the semester, I frequently, when we would come in and we would research for the first day, I would tell them that the library was the place to find anything and everything. And if it wasn't a 3x5 card, I would mark them down 1 point because they have like 2 weeks to get this done. And when you have a requirement for a boss, when you have a job, you need to have the right materials. So if they couldn't find their own, they could always find a source card, markers, paper clips, whatever they needed in the library. And I wanted them to understand that the library is very versatile for them and that they should be able to, I would say 3x5 cards, they've got short legs, they don't run very fast, you should be able to catch one. And if you don't know how, ask somebody. You should be able to figure this out. And this was a requirement for all the projects in class. They would essentially be done the same way. And as a teacher, I was able to get through grading a lot of students' projects in a short amount of time. And I was so surprised. Students really had a hard time because I left these projects open-ended. I didn't tell them that I was looking for any certain information, and they would get a little weirded out about that. But I wanted them to understand that I just want you to learn something new, something different, investigate something. What have you never heard of before? And if it's not on the list, suggest something to me. I'll probably say yes. If you can find enough information to research it on, that's absolutely fine. And I think that makes for a more dynamic learning experience. And it keeps students interested. Here's an example of an actual student project on polio. And now they had a person sitting next to them holding that poster, and then they presented directly from the poster to the class. And they had the option of a poster or a PowerPoint. They had 3 major projects in my class. And generally out of those, I always wanted them to do at least 1 poster so that they could do a little bit of everything throughout the class. And here's leave yourself an out. If you can, try and create a few lesson plans to give yourself a break. There's movies available. I mean, for math, there's Hidden Figures. There are movies that apply to every single subject that is taught in schools. You can develop a worksheet for them. You can make stations. Games are a big one. Any way that you can get students out of their desks is a real benefit, and students appreciate it. You can find games, you could alter them to fit your needs or build your own. Checkers, chess, shoots and ladders. Um, uh, I did a lot of this, and sometimes in all honesty, I really had a zero budget. And when you have a zero budget, you have to get real creative real quick. So I had some students make a puzzle poster or um, a matching poster, and then later on I would use that with other classes the following semester and let them use that as a station so that they were being exposed to other information for that particular unit. Um, you can develop decks of information for a particular quiz or a particular unit. And then as they play checkers, for each turn, they could pull a question. They have to answer the question. If they answer it right, then they get to move their piece. If they don't answer it right, then the other person gets to move and they lose out their turn. Just different ways for you to do different things. You can find checkers, chess, shoots and ladders at garage sales. If you really have a zero budget like I did, I would take old student posters and I would have a student assistant make checkerboards on the back of them. And then you could use poker chips for the pieces to create the checkerboards. And that way you can have a class set easily and quickly with almost no expense. Self-directed projects like cut and paste, they're cutting from magazines, or they're working on a prepared worksheet, or they're doing a drawing assignment that symbolizes something that you want them to understand or explore a little bit in your particular class. Any opportunity to get them out of their desks is good. They can sit on the floor and play checkers and read the unit questions and play those games piece by piece or step by step. And that gives them exposure to the information that you want them to work with. It also gives them that interaction with somebody else. And believe it or not, I was shocked by this, but there are kids who do not know how to play checkers. And so going back to some of those one-on-one activities is actually beneficial across the board. But I remember being surprised by that. Here is a basic example of a game that I used that I built in my classroom. Now, this was used as a final exam. And what I did was a student assistant did this for me. They typed it all up and they typed them in like a card form. And you can see the yellow section there. That was a yellow set of questions. So it had about 35 different cards. And I called this game "How the Health Are You?" And the game on the right, those were ones that had been used for a couple of semesters. Now, I would either number students off to have them play in groups, and then another easy way, you can see this solo cup with the chips in it. I would use a solo cup with poker chips, and then for every answer that they got right, they got a poker chip, and then whoever had the most chips at the end got starbursts or whatever it was. But they all ended up reviewing for the final exam. And some of them didn't even realize it was the final. I've had kids go into the final and like, "Hey, we've seen this information before." I'm like, yes, you have. The game on the left, that's a Jenga game. That is a modified Jenga game. And then there were a couple of decks of cards that I could purchase that exposed them to questions where they had to talk amongst themselves, a group of 3 or 4 kids, and they could play Jenga while they answered those questions. So they would answer a question, and then they, whatever piece they moved, the color, the questions on the deck corresponded with that particular question. So those are some options. And you can modify all sorts of things that are out there. One of the trickiest things I found as an educator is trying to avoid judgment. Any decent teacher deserves an Oscar for not responding with either laughter or horror, just depending on the particular situation. Um, any way that you can entice cooperation, anything that can act as a carrot to kind of get them to work collectively as a group. If you have two kids that do not get along, real basic, put them on the opposite ends of the classroom and try and make sure that they don't um, get in any group work with one another until that particular situation is passed or dealt with, or they've made peace, whatever it is. Um, Simple treats like candy, or larger group awards such as game days, unit parties. The parties that I had in class, there was a drug-free party at the end of the first 9 weeks where their ticket to the party, I don't want teachers to put out money for this. Their ticket to the party was, one, we get to have a party, and that means that you're going to bring something to the party. A bag of Cheetos. We would make flavored smoothies, strawberry smoothies, and lime smoothies at this party. And so I would have somebody bring the strawberries. I would have somebody else um, bring um, Diet Pepsi or a package of Oreos or a bag of Lay's or whatever. Their ticket to the party was bringing one item, and so the week before the party, we would take half a class period, and I would record. I would actually have a student write it down. I would record who's bringing what, so that they are involved in the process, and you don't have a few people bringing things and other students not bringing things and eating everything. So it's fair, um, and it can get done. And then we would have, they would have their choice of a couple different movies to watch while we had smoothies and they had a snack party. Um, at the end of the semester, during the final exam time, we had a healthy snack party. So reduced fat Oreos or baked potato chips. I told them I would be open minded with this party because I didn't want them being limited to celery and bottled water. So I just wanted them to be familiar with um, uh, labels and what's available. So granola bars and ants on a log, or um, uh, anything that diet pop, a gallon of milk, just different things. We would have a healthy snack party, and um, they would be thrilled with it. And that gets those students working towards a goal. When you can put a goal out in front of them about 9 weeks away, they seem to work for it. Um, Utilizing humor, putting things in perspective can add to that rapport. Uh, you do have to win them over. And again, it would take about 2 weeks for that to happen. Um, but when they would recognize that I was attempting to be fair and I'm attempting to get us all working collectively as a group, it's surprising to me that they would willingly cleave to that consistently. Now, this is well worth the time and effort. And I had these good news postcards printed up for me. We do have a print shop at our school, and I'm sure there's different ways that you can do these. But on this side, sometimes I would send these at home in the mail. Sometimes you could pass these out at the beginning of the semester and have them address it to themselves. It will give you feedback right away on who's able to do that and who doesn't have any idea how to address an envelope. That's our school crest up there on the left. On the other side, it says good news from Hananiga. Now, there were a few years where I was able to write out a postcard for every single student in every single one of my classes. I will say that there were some situations where these were They did amazing work. I would tell students, you know what, if you're in trouble with your parents and you need it out and you've done a nice job, just let me know. I am not beyond sending these home at a time when they're needed. That's leverage. Leverage will get you so far with students. And they'd be like, wow. There was a time when I had a very, very challenging young man in my class. And he had actually been expelled the previous year and he came back. And he had a real chip on his shoulder. He wanted to upturn everything. And he had a gang. It wasn't a gang. He had a group of young men that would follow him. And I needed to diminish the power that he had with this group of 4 or 5 young men. So one at a time, I took these postcards. One at a time, I would hold back. I'd write the postcard and I'd take one of those 5 kids. I would, whatever their name was, Brad or whatever. I would quietly talk to him and say, "Can I talk to you for just a minute after class?" Everybody else leaves, and I would take this postcard out and I would say, "You know what? You do such a nice job in my class, and I just wanted you to know you're on time. You do what you're asked to. Um, you're here every day. I really appreciate it, and I wanted you to know that." And I consistently did that over a period of about 2 weeks with this group of about 6 to 7 young men. And all of a sudden, that group leader, he was a very negative leader in that he would lead them into trouble. All of a sudden, those kids peeled away. And he didn't understand why, but he couldn't get them to do what he wanted them to do. And I remember the one young man that I had given the postcard to, he took the postcard and he slid it in his side pocket. So no one else ever saw it, but his behavior changed and he no longer would follow that negative leader that was creating havoc in that class. And all of a sudden, that kid who was a real challenge was all by himself, and it really was. I could handle him as an individual, though his specific behavior didn't improve much. I did have to watch him like a hawk, but as he would damage the building, he would, I caught him throwing shoes at expensive lights in the gymnasium one day, that type of thing. But these can be used for improvement. They can be used for building rapport. If you catch a kid in the hallway and they help some kid pick up all their stuff that fell, those are all really good uses of these particular postcards. And I found them to really make a difference. I can't tell you the number of times that I've been stopped out in public. I went to a McDonald's drive-thru and a young man was talking to me and he said, I just work here in the summer. He said, I'm a full-time teacher in Rockford. And he said, I teach 3rd grade. Your postcard is taped up in my classroom. Another young woman who was really a challenge to write one of these for, I ran into her at a junior college and she followed me and talked to me for 8 to 10 minutes all the way back to my vehicle about the fact that she had gotten one of these postcards and she never forgot it and she still had it. I can't count how many times I have been talked to about these postcards, both parents, guardians, and previous students. So they really are a nice thing to have in your corner. You can have them made for your particular school. I started using them, and the principal liked it so much that he had them printed and available for every teacher in the building. So, you could make them on a copy machine, out of paper if you needed to, but they really are worth the time and energy to invest in these, whether you send them home through the mail or you give them individually to students. Oops. Class rewards. I explained that we had a drug-free party, healthy snack party, chess, checkers, backgammon. Progressive relaxation was something that my students really prized. And it's just where they tense different muscle systems and then relax. And I would have them lay down on blankets on the floor. And my students would really keep one another in line. We did progressive relaxation maybe about 4 times a semester. And because they're so stressed out, it's a really good skill for them to learn. Um, Station days were another possibility. Get them out of their desks and when they could use manipulatives if you have that type of thing available. Utilize student assistants. They could organize, they could build you chess games, they could clean, they could build things. Um, Zero budget, students could, as I said before, could build some of those things and you could use them later. Assignments, build a game using class information. Here's an example of one. This was an assignment done by a student. Now, this one happens to be an acupuncture, but it was just something they chose. But if you had a matching one for whatever information, then you could actually use this as station work with other classes. That's just an idea. This was something that I ended the class with. These are instructions. And this is just an example of my humor. Please remain silent for the duration of the final exam. You may leave your seat to turn in your completed final exam. Reading or studying after your final is permitted. When taking the final exam, quiet crying is allowed. Please do not wail or drop to the floor in the fetal position. It is distracting. So my point is, any way that you can inject humor is a win. Because I don't think there's enough of it. I don't think there's enough inspiring in education, and I don't think there's enough enjoyment in education. So I hope you can find something that you can utilize. But the big thing is staying consistent and attempting to be fair. And I wish you all luck. I did survive 33 years in education. So I wish you all luck. Arlen, I'm done if you are.
Wonderful, Anne. Thank you so much for sharing all these excellent examples from throughout your career. Really good stuff. So I hope everybody took something back that they can implement right away.
Sorry, I went a little long.
Oh, no problem. If I understand if the participants need to log out, it is after 4, but we can hang out for just another minute to see if there's any questions come in the chat. I don't see any. If you'll notice, there was a Sergio Williamson. He wasn't even in the room. Posted about the transcript of the session. I think that's a scam, so don't click on that link from Sergio Williamson. Yeah, we've heard of this happening, of people being able to send messages through the chat even though they're not logged into the session.
Really?
Khalid, great question. Will the deck and recording be shared? Yes. Once the recording is processed by tomorrow, I'll be able to share it out with everybody. And what do you think about sending out a PDF of your PowerPoint slides?
Would you like me to send that to you?
Yep, forward me the PowerPoint presentation. I'll turn it into a PDF.
Okay, that'll work.
Great. All right, thank you, Jim. Totally understand. Thanks for everyone's participation today. Just lots of kudos coming in for you, Anne.
Oh, that's nice to know. Thanks.
And I appreciate you doing this when you're not feeling 100% too. That's no small task. Be able to give a presentation with a cold.
I'm just glad that we got through it with this Chromebook, because I was really worried about my laptop dying on you. I'm happy to do it. Anything that I can do to help teachers stay in the classroom.
Absolutely, we appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.